Well, with the slowing economy and jobs numbers out on Friday, the economy is shifting into focus in the election campaign. So despite all the headlines about Trump's latest bluster, at the end of the day, will economic issues drive voters' decision at the polls? Art Laffer, former Reagan economic policy advisor, is here with his take. Art, let us focus, if we can, on growth, on economic growth, because Hillary was talking about what Donald has to answer for. I think what she has to answer for are the growth numbers. Under President Obama, the growth numbers average out to 1.7%. That's the growth number. Under Reagan, it was 3.5%. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't be growing at 3.5%. Do you?
No, I don't. In fact, we should be growing a lot more than we are. In fact, this, I think, is the single worst recovery in U.S. history, at least in the post-World War II period. And no matter how you slice it, whether you look at employment, adult population, or you look at GDP growth compared Reagan to Obama, any way you look at it, new housing purchases per 1,000 population, it's all just terrible. It's the single worst one. And if anything's going to bury Hillary, it's going to be the economy. And I just hope the Trump people touted a lot more because you mentioned all the stats.
You mentioned all the stats about the economy. There's one political stat, a poll that you should mention, which is 60% of Americans think that economic conditions are actually getting worse. I mean, that
they are.
But on a political state, because you've got some serious political background as well as economic background, isn't that going to affect voters at the polls?
Oh, it sure is. There are all sorts of things that should affect voters at the polls. Do you remember James Carville when he said, "It's the economy, stupid"?
Of course.
And that was James Carville's quote, not mine. But he was completely correct on that. Carville was right, and almost whenever you have an economy that's really bad, it inures very much to the detriment of the incumbent. And Hillary's the incumbent in this race, and, you know, it's a referendum on her.
Here's the excuse that Hillary and President Obama and others make for the conditions being so slow, that we went through a financial crisis unlike anything we've ever seen since the Great Depression and everything. But there are some examples out there in the real world, and one is Ireland. Ireland is exploding, a 26% GDP growth in a place which has featured the kind of economic policies that Reagan had and that a lot of the tax cutting and everything that Trump wants. I mean, the fact is you have that as one example. You also have Venezuela and Brazil. We're about to see these pathetic Olympic Games in Brazil. I say pathetic because of what Brazil is going through now, which is based on other economic policies that many say is the ones that we would get if we elected Hillary.
You know, I was involved in the Ireland tax cuts there when they got the 12.5 corporate rate. And if I can, I have an awful joke for you, David, but why is everyone investing in Ireland?
Why?
Because the capital is always Dublin. Just joking.
So, that's pretty good. I like that, actually.
It's a wonderful supply-side story. Yeah. Compare Ireland to France. Compare Ireland to Greece. Compare Ireland to anyone.
12.5% corporate rate. 12.5%.
It's just beautiful. And you look at the U.S. Look at the states. Look at Texas versus California. Yeah. Look at California versus Texas. Look at New York versus Florida. You look at Tennessee versus Kentucky. Look at all of these comparisons, and it always works. Supply-side economics is all about incentives, and if you pay people not to work and tax them if they do work, David, don't be surprised if you get a lot of people not working.
Well, we'll see.
And that's exactly where we are.
If the campaign focuses on what Donald Trump says or what the economy is doing. Art Laffer,
why doesn't Trump do it?
Yeah,
well, good to see you, David. Thank you very much for having me.
Good to see you as well.